What's up guys, RKon here. So after waiting for a long time, last month we finally got that big mainline Nintendo Direct. I was speculating in another video that the Direct could perhaps be tied to an announcement of new hardware. That theory obviously turned out to be wrong, as there doesn't seem to be any new Switch hardware in 2022. However, even though my timing was off, some of the speculation and theories that I presented in that video actually still very much apply. According to me, Nintendo's way of handling things this year has actually started to paint a clearer picture of what we can expect from them next year. Let me explain what I mean. As we know, Nintendo only had 2 mainline directs this year, as opposed to their usual 3. They skipped their mainline June direct, and it seems like the reason for this was that we already knew about their main lineup for the rest of this year. They announced Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and Pokémon Scarlet and Violet in February this year, and Splatoon 3, Mario + Rabbids Sparks of Hope and Bayonetta 3 were shown last year. There wasn't any need for a mainline direct in June, as Nintendo didn't want to start announcing new games just yet. However, a September or fall direct typically finds itself in a different spot. Sure, the upcoming holiday games typically get new trailers, as their marketing cycles start to ramp up towards their releases. But September Directs also have another, perhaps more important, purpose. They are used to announce and hype up games that will release in the beginning of the following year, so that people can buy a Switch for the holidays and have some exciting new games to look forward to in the upcoming months. So a mainline September Direct was definitely more necessary than a mainline June Direct this year. And the September Direct that we got did its job. Sure, it wasn't the best Direct of all time, but also not the worst either. We got some updates for games that will be released soon, and we got some announcements for things to look forward to next year. Now, in my opinion, this September Direct was a little bit different from the typical September Direct, and I'm not referring to the number of farming games that we got in this Direct. During the September Direct last year, we got games like Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, and an announcement trailer for Bayonetta 3 with actual gameplay footage of the game. Kirby was released in March, Monster Hunter was released in June, and Bayonetta will be released in October. What about the games that were announced in this past September Direct? Well, among other games we got Fire Emblem Engage, which will be released in January, as well as Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe and Octopath Traveler 2, which will be released in February. We of course also got a trailer for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, with a name reveal as well as a release date reveal, which we now know is May 12, 2023. So we got gameplay footage of the game releasing in January, Fire Emblem, and gameplay footage of the games releasing in February, Kirby and Octopath Traveler. For Zelda, Nintendo basically had to give us some new gameplay footage of the game, otherwise I believe that many fans would have been very upset. But we don't have any information about any game potentially releasing in March or April. This is actually quite odd, as Nintendo usually has a big game releasing in March to close out the fiscal year. Now, you might have noticed a pattern with Tears of the Kingdom. We have gotten 3 trailers, plus a little snippet of new footage in the video where they announced the delay. However, all of those trailers have been more like teasers than trailers. They have all been very short, and they have all given us very little new information each time. We still don't know much about this game at all. We're just waiting and waiting for that big blowout of the game where we actually get to see lots of new gameplay, as well as more information on the actual story of the game. Many thought that that was what we would get in this September Direct, but as it turned out, that wasn't the case at all. For Breath of the Wild, we got a big blowout at E3 2016, about 9 months before the release of the game. Here we are now, about 7 months before the release of Tears of the Kingdom, and we still know so little of the game. Could we perhaps get a dedicated Zelda Direct before this year is over? Potentially, but I don't at all expect it. What about the Game Awards? Well, there is definitely a chance that we see something new from the game there, but if that will be the case, then I expect it to once again be something short and definitely not a big blowout. What does this all mean? Well, we obviously can't know for sure, but I have a theory. Maybe the reason why we have only gotten short teasers of the game is because they want to release the game either alongside new hardware or shortly after new hardware has been released. If Nintendo would have announced the Switch Pro this year, they would basically also have to release it this year. It is very unlikely that they would reveal it now and release it in the beginning of next year, as that would mean that a lot of people would probably skip buying a Switch for the holidays and instead wait for the Pro model to release. This is also why I previously discussed the possibility of them announcing a Pro model in September and releasing it in perhaps November. We can't know if this was their plan at one point, perhaps tied to their actual plan of releasing Tears of the Kingdom this year, but we at least know that that is not the case now. But take a look at how Nintendo has handled their hardware releases during the Switch generation. We got the Switch in 2017. We got the Switch Lite and the Redbox Switch revision in 2019. We got the Switch OLED model in 2021. So during this generation, Nintendo has a pattern of releasing new hardware every other year. Of course, this doesn't mean that they have to follow this pattern and release new hardware in 2023, but this pattern at least tells us that 2023 is much more likely for new hardware to be released than what 2022 was. This brings me back to my point earlier. In the September Direct last year, Nintendo had no problems with announcing games or showing gameplay of games that would release a bit further ahead, because these games would run on the same hardware as what was currently out on the market. But that might not be the case this time. I'm not saying that Tears of the Kingdom will not be playable on the current Switch models, but if a Switch Pro is actually coming in the first half of next year, why would they not want to give us that blowout on the new hardware, considering that that would be the superior version of the game? But of course they know that they can't just show nothing of the game until that potential new hardware has been announced, so that could be why they are only giving us these short teasers until then. Well, now you might ask, what about Pikmin 4? That game was announced and shown in this past September Direct, and will most likely release after Tears of the Kingdom. But think about that announcement trailer, or teaser, for a bit. They gave us a very short glimpse of what the game looks like. Even though you can't really compare them completely, you could say that Pikmin 4 in a way is the Bayonetta 3 of next year. We knew about those two games for years before they were actually properly announced, with a release year reveal. But while Bayonetta 3 gave us quite a big gameplay trailer in the September Direct last year, we didn't get any gameplay at all for Pikmin 4 in this year's September Direct. I believe that they wanted to announce something more for 2023, something more to be excited for than just Tears of the Kingdom beyond February. But they want to give us that big gameplay reveal on the new hardware, so they thought that it would be enough for now to give us that little glimpse of the game. Now, I also want to talk a bit about Metroid. Many credible insiders have stated that a remake or remaster of the first Metroid Prime exists, and that it has already finished its development. It seemed very likely that this remake or remaster would show up in this past Direct, and release sometime before the holidays. But as we know, it didn't show up in the Direct, which I honestly was very surprised about. But I don't think we should get angry at the insiders and state that this remake or remaster just isn't a real thing. I definitely still think that this is a real thing, and I think that it's just a matter of when we will see it, not if. We know that Metroid Prime 4 is on its way. The first Metroid Prime is seen as one of the greatest video games of all time. It is personally my all-time favorite game, and there are so many people out there now who haven't had the chance to play it. So why wouldn't Nintendo want to reintroduce that game in a modern version to new players, while at the same time creating hype for Prime 4? It just doesn't make sense to not do it. Jeff Grubb still believes that the game could come out for the holidays, so if that is actually the case, why didn't it show up in the Direct? Maybe they wanted the focus to be on the other games, like Zelda and Pikmin. Perhaps they didn't want to put it in the Direct without also giving us something on Prime 4, which they might want to wait to show anything of until they can show it on new hardware. I won't completely rule out the possibility of them dropping the announcement trailer for the Prime remaster or remake on Twitter sometime soon and for it to still release this year. But at this point, I don't expect it. There is of course also the possibility of it getting announced during the Game Awards, but considering that Nintendo hasn't really had a big presence there for the past few years, I don't know if that would change this year. However, if we don't see it this year, I think there might be a good reason for that. Metroid Dread was promoted and released alongside the Switch OLED model, which seemed to be a successful approach by Nintendo. The original Metroid Prime was released on the GameCube back in 2002, and it is definitely one of the most graphically impressive games for its time, if not the most graphically impressive game. According to the rumors, the Switch Pro will bring about a major improvement in performance compared to the current models, with 4K upscaling. What if Nintendo decided to hold off the remake or remaster to release it on Switch Pro, to make this game take advantage of the performance boost and make it a true graphical showcase of what the Switch Pro can deliver? You might say that that is what Prime 4 will be, and while I definitely think that Prime 4 will be the best looking game on the system when it releases, there is probably still at least a year until then. The lack of a big Nintendo title in March makes me wonder if the Switch Pro won't release together with Tears of the Kingdom in May, but rather with a Metroid Prime remake or remaster in March or April. Nintendo needs a window of at least 2 to 3 months between the reveal and release of new hardware, so I can definitely see them announcing the Switch Pro in January or February, and having a direct at the same time or shortly after. In that direct, they could then finally announce Metroid Prime remake or remaster, give us extended gameplay videos of Tears of the Kingdom and Pikmin 4, as well as announcing new games for 2023 that they didn't want to show yet. Add to this the multiple reports about dev kits for a Switch 4K being in the hands of developers, and Nintendo stockpiling materials for the past fiscal year, which usually happens before the launch of a new model. I also quickly want to bring up Hogwarts Legacy. I discussed in my previous Switch Pro video about the fact that the developers for this game don't seem to want to answer any questions about the Switch version of this game. Neither about the release date, nor about whether the Switch release will run natively or be cloud-based. I still think that there's a chance that this game will run natively on the Switch Pro and be cloud-based for the current Switch models, which would explain them not wanting to give any details on this. So, to summarize, I could see the Switch Pro get released in March or April alongside the Metroid Prime remake or remaster, or in May alongside Tears of the Kingdom, with Metroid Prime releasing around the same time. The notion of upgraded Switch hardware releasing in the first half of 2023 has actually also been stated by Nate the Hate, a legitimate Nintendo insider. If this will actually turn out to be true, it has to be released sometime between March and May. It's not gonna happen in January or February, and it's not gonna happen in June, because why would they release new hardware 1 month after Tears of the Kingdom and not instead at the same time? But just imagine a release window with Metroid Prime remake or remaster, Tears of the Kingdom, a huge third-party game like Hogwarts Legacy, and perhaps even one of the rumored Donkey Kong and Mario games releasing shortly thereafter. This is of course all just speculation. There is obviously still the possibility of no new hardware coming in the first half of next year, or next year at all. But according to me, there is just too much smoke for there not to be a fire, and at least in my opinion, the puzzle pieces of Nintendo's plan are starting to fall into place. And that makes me very excited for next year. But let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section down below. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. This is Archaon, and I wish you a wonderful day. Bye bye.